This is Jim Bish with the Americans in Wartime Museum. Today's date is January 24th, 2020, and I'm conducting an interview with Eileen Berger in Sun City West, Arizona. Eileen, would you please give me your full name and where you were born?
My name is Eileen Opatz Berger, and I was born in central Minnesota, Sauk Rapids, Minnesota.
Okay, and Opatz, that's your maiden name, correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. And what war were you participating with?
I was a Rosie the Riveter in World War II.
Okay, thank you. Did you grow up in Minnesota then? You were
Yes,
born there.
I was about third generation, fourth generation American. My great-grandfather emigrated in 1870. Is Opatz, is that German? And actually, I think it could be German or Polish. We always say it's an area of Poland called Silesia, southwest Poland.
Okay. And Berger sounds like it's German.
Yes, and I married Gerald Berger, and his family was all German.
So you grew up then in Sauk Rapids?
That's right.
And did you go to, that's where you went to school?
Yeah, I went to grade school, and then I went to high school in St. Cloud, which is only 3 miles away.
Oh, okay. And that's where you graduated from high school at?
From
St.
high
Cloud?
school, that's right.
What year did you graduate from high school?
From high school, I graduated in 1943.
Okay. So when you were in high school, the war was going on. 43. So you were probably a sophomore or junior when Pearl Harbor happened.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
What do you remember about learning about Pearl Harbor?
Well, I had just come home from a movie. It was a Sunday, and everybody was hovered around the radio because there was this terrible news coming through regarding a bombing in Pearl Harbor, Hawaii. And we all just stopped and just listened carefully. I remember what a shock it was.
Shock to everybody.
Yeah, shock to everyone, for sure.
Did that impact your high school then? Were a lot of the boys getting ready to go off to war then?
Well, there were a few young men, but at that, I think I was maybe a sophomore or maybe a junior, and I don't remember a lot of high school students joining the military, but I remember one young man wanted to, and he was rated as a 4F, which means because of health, he was not able to be accepted, and he really felt terrible about that.
So you graduated in 1943. What did you do after you graduated from high school?
Well, after high school, I had planned to become a beautician, like a beloved aunt. And when I went to sign up after I graduated, they said, well, they're sorry, but you have to be 18. And at that time, I was still only 17 years old. So they said, you come back in a year, and of course we would like to have you, come to our school. Well, so that was a big shock about what I was going to do, and so we had a family meeting, and my dad said, well, maybe in the interim you could go into take a business course. And so my mother had been taught by Benedictine nuns. And while I was a senior in high school, the Benedictine nuns had come to talk to the girls at Cathedral High School. And they said just to consider the possibility of maybe attending college at the College of St. Benedict, which was about 15 miles away. Well, when all this happened that I couldn't go to beauty school, I suggested to my mother and dad that, well, maybe I could take that business course at St. Benedict's. Well, my mother thought that would be a very good idea, and so I signed up for a one-year course in typing, shorthand, accounting, etc. But as it turned out, I did not like it. It was not a good fit. And so I decided by the time Christmas came, no, that was not for me. But I really liked the fact that I was in college and I enjoyed it. And so I thought, gosh, how could I manage going to St. Benedict's? Because my father was a barber, and we had at that point 5 children. In fact, we had six. My younger sister was quite a bit younger. And so I told them I'm going to see if I couldn't somehow pay for my college. Well, lo and behold, in the paper, it just happened, there was a big ad, and it said, women workers desperately needed. Come and we'll train you. We have a 2-week workshop, and consider working in a defense plant. And so that's how it happened. And I had no skills with any kind of what am I trying to say?
Machinery or
with machinery, like right? And so I was very nervous that could I really do it, but they provided the information. I attended the 2-week course, and yes, in fact, then I got hired, and then that began my 16 months working as a Rosie the Riveter.
Where was the plant located at?
The plant was located about 3 miles west of St. Cloud in a town called Waite Park. Historically, it was called Pantown because of an auto dealer that at one time built cars. But anyway, there was a huge property there about the size of a football field, and it was called Chargale, Chargale. Chargale built C-47 military transport planes, and they were not assembled. They were not assembled in the Chargale plant, but parts of the plant provided the fuselage for the plane. And so after we had finished our part, it was sent on to another location where eventually the planes were put together.
Yeah, so so your plant produced a lot of the parts, like you said, the fuselage, that then was transported elsewhere to be assembled.
Exactly.
That's good. So Chargale was the name of the company?
That's right.
And what year was it that you started working for them? Was that 1944?
That would have been, yes, 1944 in June. In June of 1944. Okay. And then I worked till about June or July of 1945 when the war was winding down, and they were informed that they would no longer need any more of the transport military planes.
So that was kind of an important time in the war, June 1944. That's the same time that we invaded Europe with D-Day.
Yes.
Do you remember hearing about D-Day and all of that?
Of course. Yeah, that was, we had been, told that it was coming, and everybody was praying that day because we knew that it would be a terrible, sad day for many, many young men. And so, yes, of course, I do remember that.
Were you friends with any, or did any of your own family, was any of your own family or brothers in World War II?
Yeah, I had an older brother, Ralph, R-A-L-P-H, who was in the Marines. And so at the time we didn't know exactly where he was, but we knew it was in the Pacific area, so he was not involved with the European. But I had 2 uncles, one Thomas Opatz, who was killed on Anzio Beach when he when the group came from Africa
Right.
on to Italy. And then, and an aunt married an Adolf Schmeja, Schieja.
Uh-huh.
And he was in the army and did in fact participate in D-Day. And fortunately, he came through the war and did come home.
Yeah. Your brother Ralph, he made it through the war okay?
And my
in the
brother
Pacific?
Ralph too. As it turned out, he was located in Guam and so did not see, fortunately, terrible battles. Yeah. He was with some weather reporting area.
Did you have any friends that were in the war?
Well, of course, many of the neighbors we knew were in this service, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So could you tell me a little bit, did you live at home then when you were working at Shark Hill?
Yes, I lived at home and was part of a carpool that picked me up because I worked the night shift. And that started at 5 in the evening and worked until about 1 in the morning. And so and all the young men were gone. There was no social life.
Yeah.
And so it worked out just fine.
Yeah.
And every month I would take my check to the bank, and I was determined that this was a divine intervention, that I was able to save money that I could then return to St. Benedict's.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, and so the original idea of becoming a Rosie the Riveter was not patriotism. I would say it was a practical thing. I thought how great it is that maybe, I can pay for my education. But in the end, I was always so happy that I could be part.
Yeah.
A small part of this big project.
Big event. Did you befriend, or were there a lot of people that you made friends with while you were working at the plant?
Yes, although, you had one partner as a Rosie the Riveter. There were always the person with the rivet gun and the person with a metal bar called a blocker. And so you worked together, sight unseen. Each of us was on the opposite side of the big metal aluminum sheets.
Yeah.
And you communicated by tapping on the metal to say you were ready and she was ready, and then you would go, and then squish would go the rivet.
Yeah.
And then all night long you would put together these two enormous sheets of aluminum, put them together, rivet all the way down, and then an inspector would come to look if it was adequate. And that's what we did.
Yeah. So you ran the rivet gun mostly? Or did you do both jobs?
I did at times, but I would say mostly I was the blocker.
It appears to me that was pretty heavy work. Both of those, running the rivet gun and the blocker.
Yeah.
Was it something you had to get used to?
Well, we were young and we were on our feet for all the 8 hours. But I don't remember being exhausted.
Yeah.
No. I think, and then we had 1/2 hour that we could take for lunch, where then we could have a little more socializing with all the women who were then part of the big group.
Yeah. About how many women were working there, do you know? Was it mostly women, or was it about half and half, men and women in the plant?
No, I would say, as I recall, about 90% were women.
Real heavily women.
First time for many of them, married women whose husbands were now in the service, and they were desperate to hire women. And so for the first time in their lives, they realized they could do it. They could actually get a check. And it gave them a real sense of accomplishment.
Yeah. Do you remember how much money you made? What was your wages?
I do not remember that. I don't remember that.
Did it seem like quite a bit of money, though, for you at the time?
Yes, at the time it did. It was, I had worked a part-time in a department store with the idea of saving my money for college. But there was no comparison. I think at that time, at the department store, you got 50 cents an hour.
Yeah.
And this, I don't remember the exact number, but, oh yeah, it was by far much better paying from the government. Huh?
Yeah. And your carpool, were there 4 women that went with the carpool with you, or how did you get to work?
It happened, it was a man who owned the car and who apparently was 4F. And so he got a job at the defense plant. But, and there were a few, maybe the director of the departments or the checkers who could see if the job was done right, a foreman, they would call him a foreman, that were men. But I'd say even the women were foremen.
Yeah. When you were there, what did you work, days or nights, or what? Or did you flip back and forth?
No,
What was your
it
shift?
was always nights.
Always nights.
Always nights.
So you went to work.
I left, I think, maybe 4:15. And by the time we got there and checked in, the job started at 5 o'clock and ended at 1 in the morning.
So you were driving back in the night every day.
That's right.
And I'm assuming you went to bed then and got up late morning or something like that. And you were living with your parents the entire time.
Yeah, that's right.
So that helped you save some more money as well.
Oh yes, no, and they were very, very generous with. They never objected to after high school that I didn't get a job and contribute to the family finances. No, they were just happy that I was there.
Yeah. Do you remember the women or woman's name that mostly ran the rivet gun that you worked beside?
It's interesting. I know she came from northern Minnesota, from the range, we call it the Iron Range, and her name was Mary Ann, but I don't recall her last name, but we worked together for that entire time.
So she was your partner throughout that whole time?
Yes, that's right, that's right.
And so they didn't do much adjusting unless someone had quit or something to bring someone in. It appears they kept you guys as a unit.
Yes, that's right, that's right. If you worked together well and there were no problems.
Did you ride with the same women always from your hometown to that?
Yes,
Do you remember them?
No, and I don't remember their names.
And they all worked at the plant though?
Yeah,
and doing different jobs?
Yes, of course.
Yeah. Do you remember doing anything special in the plant, like for a holiday or at the time that the European War ended? In May of '45, do you remember doing anything like a little celebration or something?
By the time they had announced that the plant would be closing, then you want to?
That's fine.
Okay.
That's okay.
Many of us then decided to maybe take a little trip, and so actually, after the war, toward the end of the war, when we no longer were working at the plant, I was up in Canada. I had gone up to Canada with the idea that maybe there would be a job there. But anyway, as it turned out, when the end came and we knew that the war was going to be over, I took a Greyhound bus back home, and just as I was getting off the bus in Sauk Rapids, Minnesota, the bells started to ring and the war was over. Yeah. And so that evening, everybody showed up in downtown St. Cloud and so happy and that their loved ones would be coming home.
Yeah.
But of course, there was much sadness too because so many were not coming home.
Yeah. I'm assuming people were celebrating. They were also attending church services, all kinds of things.
Yes, that's right. And the church, and there were lots of church services, and the bells and the church bells were ringing.
Do you remember what you did that night?
Well, I remember going into St. Cloud and joining just the throngs. Just trying, just being so happy and so thankful it was finally, after 4 some years, it was over.
Yeah. Getting back to your work, how many fuselages or big sheets of aluminum were you able to rivet, or your tandem able to rivet a night, or were you able
Well,
just one a night, or did you take more than one day to do that?
no, I think actually, as I remember, yeah, I think it was maybe just 2 enormous sheets a night, because they were all placed on like a skeleton plane. And there were little holes on both sheets that had to be aligned, and then you align them, and then you started putting the rivets in. But it could be that we did more than the 2 big sheets, but
Yeah.
I don't have a strong memory of that.
Did you have to line up the sheets then, or did somebody else do that for you?
Well, no, they were pretty much in place. When we got there, the 2 enormous pieces of aluminum were already in place, and then you would go up a couple of stairs, and one on one side and one on the other, and that's how you started.
And so you pretty much riveted and bucked the rivets all night long.
That's right. That's
And
right.
you did that for over a year.
Yes, uh-huh.
Same job.
Yeah, right.
What other jobs do you remember any other women doing in the plant? Is that one thing that most people were doing?
No, Chargale was strictly the military. It could be similar to the C-46, but C-47s were what we were told,
Yeah.
But they didn't want you talking about what was going on in the defense plants very
Yeah.
much. It was kind of a secret.
Yeah.
Not really, but
Yeah.
anyway, we were encouraged not to talk about it too much.
Were women pretty punctual about showing up to work every day
yes,
and all of that?
yes. I don't remember people being late. No.
Did they have any meetings about making sure that you were on time, or try to make sure that message was delivered?
Well, I think you punched in. There was some kind of a
Time clock? Or
yeah,
something like
some
that?
kind of a clock. Oh, that's right.
And so that was never a problem as
No,
far as
no, as
people
I
that didn't show up?
remember. No problem.
Yeah. So when did you, that was in this late summer then of 45 that you
Yeah.
ended your job there?
Yes, that's right. And then I think it was August, wasn't it? August that the war was officially ended.
Yeah. Did you go to beauty school after that, or what did you do after
No,
you
then
finished up?
in fact, I had saved enough money that I then returned to St. Benedict's, and then a couple of summers I worked at a resort up in northern Minnesota, and I graduated from the college in 1948.
What did
And I
you-
was an English and social studies teacher, high school teacher.
Okay.
And that was, yes.
I can relate to that.
Right.
And so
Yeah,
then-
and I was the first in the, in my family, of course, to go to college. And so then when my brother came back, he took advantage of the GI Bill. And,
This is your brother Ralph?
My brother Ralph, and he graduated from the St. John's University. And then I had 3 other brothers, and out of the 4, the other younger brothers joined the Navy, and then they too graduated from St. John's. So I always feel maybe I started the tradition to go to college, and since then we've had many teachers in the family. I think 30-some teachers.
That's good.
My mother had 77 grandchildren.
Wow.
She started with 6, and from the 6 there were 38 of us. And then from the 38 they were the great
next generation.
Yeah, right. So anyway, to this day we have many teachers. So.
Yeah. Where did you teach at? What
Well, I
schools?
taught 2 years before I was married, one in Big Lake, Minnesota, and one in Forest Lake, Minnesota. Yeah. And it's been a very rewarding.
Yeah.
I love teaching, and to this day, up until age 92, I have been volunteering with English as a second language. When I was 50, I went back and got my master's degree, and so it's been a good journey.
Yeah, you've continued. Just before we wrap up, do you feel good about your service as a Rosie the Riveter then during World War II?
Oh,
looking back
yes.
on it?
I really never realized how important it was. And oh, I am so happy that as it turned out, it all worked out, and I was able to be part of that big story.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was an important role. I mean,
Yeah, it was.
we led the world in manufacturing, and a large part of that was because women were in the plants working.
Yes, and I will give you some numbers about the General Eisenhower saying what a wonderful workhorse the military transports were, and they could carry, all these soldiers with full gear,
Yeah.
and also used as a medical
Ambulances, yeah.
vehicle with about 15 stretchers with patients and 3 nurses, that kind of thing. And I'll give that to you.
Okay. I've interviewed a lot of people that were working on those transports. I mean, that they were nurses that were on going back and forth.
Oh, yes.
C-47s became pretty popular during World War II.
Yes, they called them the Goonie Birds sometimes, they were.
They're pretty legendary.
Yes, they are. And at the time we were never really. It was never really explained to us what it was we were making. So it was just a thrill when I finally saw a picture of a C-47 with all the men and the equipment marching into those planes.
Knowing that you helped rivet
I know.
all of that on the fuselage of them.
Yes, right.
So that's good. Is there anything about your work service during World War II that you would like your grandchildren or great-grandchildren to know that you maybe haven't already mentioned? Is there anything that you would like to tell them about your service during World War II?
Well, I'm just very proud of the fact that I was able to do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't a specific desire at the time, but what a nice legacy to have in my life story.
Yeah. When you were teaching those few years, did any of your colleagues know about your previous work in World War II or your students?
I don't think so. It's only in the last maybe 20 years that there's been a real interest in capturing the stories of the veterans and the Rosies. Yes.
Yeah.
And I did visit Washington, D.C. a number of years ago, and as we were standing right there by one of the big memorials to Rosie the Riveter, the lady said there wouldn't by any chance be a Rosie the Riveter in this group, would there? And they were very surprised when I said yes. As a matter of fact, I was a Rosie the Riveter.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's good. Well, we'll conclude the interview.
Okay.
And I want to thank you for your time and your work during World War II.
Well, you're so welcome.